Hey, Alli, in honor of Women's History Month, do you know which college is the oldest in the world that was chartered to grant degrees to women?
Actually, Shawna, I do because I could almost throw a stone out my door and hit this building. It is right here in Macon, Georgia, and it is Wesleyan College. And we today have the pleasure of interviewing the president, President Meaghan Blight. I'm so excited. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Girls Talk Healthy Aging podcast, where we dive deep into pressing health and fitness issues facing aging women. I'm Alli Kerr.
And I'm Shawna Kaminski, and together we'll bring candid conversations, expert advice, and personal stories that will inspire and empower you on your own wellness journey.
Today, we are in the month of March and Women's History Month, and we have the perfect guest to bring us into Women's History Month, and that is President Meaghan Blight, who is the president of Wesleyan College in Macon, Georgia. And we're going to dive in and talk about Meaghan and talk about Wesleyan's history and how that affects women's history. And we're just super excited. So, welcome, Meaghan, to the Girls Talk Healthy Aging podcast.
Thanks, Alli. Thanks, Shawna.
Really good to have you here.
Thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Can you just give us a little background on how, as a Canadian, you are in Macon, Georgia, in your
Yeah,
position?
great question. Born and raised in Canada, and came to Macon about a year and a half ago for this role. I was called by an executive recruiter and who was looking for a non-traditional candidate for this role. And I'm not an academic. I'm 38 years old. I was 36 at the time, so a bit younger than most presidents, and I was Canadian. And so I was a very non-traditional candidate for the role of president of Wesleyan College. And I just started to run the process. And I said, sure, I'd love to throw my hat in. I was very interested in, at the time, I was the vice president and chief of staff of an educational institution, a university in London, Ontario, Canada. And I had been there for 8 years. I had built up their teams, and they're in a wonderfully sustainable place. And so I was thinking about what was next. Like so many women, I didn't think I was ready for the top job. I thought I was a great number two. I was a great vice president. I was a great behind the scenes person. And so when I got this call, I was, like many of us, oh, I'm not ready. I'm not ready for that. I had talked to many of the women that I so respected who were in leadership positions and said, just run the process. What can it hurt? Just it's about learning. So if you don't get it, you probably won't, Meaghan, let's be honest. But you can learn a lot from a process. So that's what I did. I mean, it started with a couple Zoom interviews with a panel of 16. And I was just wildly honest about what I thought they needed. I wasn't anybody, I wasn't pretending to be an academic. I wasn't pretending to be somebody who had held a presidential position, particularly in a liberal arts college in the South. I was just uniquely myself. And, they kept calling me back, which I joke and say, wow, you're really glutton for punishment. Okay, so here I am. And here's what I think you need. And it got down to top three. And I was invited to campus to Macon in April of 2022. And my husband said, but we're not actually moving to Macon, Georgia. And I said, of course not. We're not moving to Macon, Georgia. I had to look it up on a map. And then I got here and I fell in love with the campus and the faculty and the staff and the board and Macon, honestly. And we felt just so welcomed. So at the end of my day, I had this whole recruitment day where you meet everybody and you present your vision and your plan. And I called my husband at the end of it and said, if they're crazy enough to give it to this Canadian from originally from Barrie, Ontario, Canada, northern Ontario, we've got to be crazy enough to say yes. And so rest is history. We've been here for about a year and a half since.
So tell us, first of all, I love that. I haven't heard that part of your story. And so that is so fun to hear how you just went for it and now you're here. How did Well, tell us about Wesleyan, because Wesleyan has a history, and I want our viewers to know about the history of Wesleyan, and then also what that means to you and how that kind of resonated with you.
Thank you for asking that question, Alli. I so appreciate that, particularly because it is Women's History Month. And Wesleyan College in Macon, Georgia, is the oldest college in the world to charter degrees to women. We have a 188-year history, and that is a history that is uniquely ours, uniquely Macon, Georgia's. There are two Wesleyan colleges. One's in Connecticut. One is coeducational. We are a women's college. We were founded a women's college. We have stayed a women's college for 188 years. And for me, when I was looking at the executive brief, talking about the job and discussing it with my family, I have two young sons who came with me, and my husband, and three dogs, a cat, and now two horses. So an absolute zoo at the Blight family house. When we were thinking about this, that legacy of graduating out women who are going to lead in their communities and in industries across the globe and helping to accelerate equality for women, particularly when you look at the World Economic Forum's Gender Equity Index, and it's, at least 130 years until we are considered equal on various measures. So women's colleges, there's a direct correlation between those who graduate from women's colleges and leading. And so if I could be part of that acceleration of equality for all women, I thought, what better calling than for me to feed my soul and feed my professional aspirations, as well as do some good for women in the process.
Cool. Would you speak to the mindset of, when you said I'm not ready,
Mm.
that you just went through the process and, do you think you would ever feel ready? My point is
Yeah.
that I think we always have to step up and play up.
Yep.
What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's like, babies and weddings and anything else, right? You're never ready. And so much of that, I mean, there's all that statistics that say, when men look at a job description, they can hit 20 or 30% of it and apply, and women want to hit 80 or 90% of it before they apply, because we're always questioning ourselves. And so for me, uh, I had that same feeling of wondering if I was going to be able to do it. And it took this community of women rallying around me to say, "Are you kidding?" And sometimes it's our communities who see us in different ways, who've said, like, look at all these things you've done in your career that have set you up for this. And the other thing is that, like, not being afraid of failure. So I could have absolutely failed in that process. If you consider not getting the job failure, for me, I was looking at it as, I want to run a presidential process in the US as a Canadian citizen, to just have that experience with a board of trustees and alums and faculty and staff talking about myself in this role, and researching the institution, researching the finances, really being able to articulate a vision, and running that process was so much growth for me, whether I got the job or not. Um, so I think, as far as, and I mean, it's kind of cliche when we talk about, you never really fail, you learn. And but I really do think that if you just say yes, and that's been my mentality my entire career, has been just say yes and we'll figure it out.
I want to ask you, Megan, that something that amazes me about you and so many women is that you're juggling family. You have small kids, I mean, not tiny kids, but still small kids and school kids,
Yep.
and your husband, and then this big position job. And so, how do women how do we do it all, or do we do it all? What does that look like?
So it's funny. I was asked to speak at a junior league thing about balance and fighting burnout, and I laughed. I was like, "But I don't do that. Like, I don't do that well." And so, it's interesting. I don't think we do. I don't think we do any of it. I think creating the narrative that you can have it all, and there's these super women who have it all and have it all together, is total crap. And so, for instance, my husband's a stay-at-home dad. So, like, whenever people say, "How do you do work-life balance?" I don't. I do work, he does life. That's how we have balance. So I don't grocery shop. I don't. I don't cook. I don't do laundry. My husband does all of those things. And for women to step up in more leadership positions, they need to demand that their spouses take on a more domestic role. I think that that's important to factor in. Is that you have so many women who are resentful because they have big jobs and this isn't the 1920s anymore, right? We have big jobs. We're earning just as much, if not more. We have uh, 1, 2, 3 degrees. And if you want to have children, something's got to give. You can't do all of that plus take on all the domestic roles, or you become very resentful in your roles. So number one, my husband does a ton, and so I have to credit him always for my success and the ability to have risen through the ranks and always been able to raise my hand and take the promotion and have the ability to travel and say yes, I'll do that, um, and have children. So I have an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old, 2 boys, who also understand that that's part of my job and are proud of me for doing that. The other part in this I think that's really important is that work and life are never mutually exclusive. It's a symbiotic relationship between the two. So sometimes I'm having life, but I've got to deal with work stuff. And sometimes I'm at work and my husband was just here and we had a coffee together before we went and picked up the kids because I've got an investment committee meeting late tonight. And so I'm not going to be home till later. And when you find a job that lights a fire within you, I always say every day is a Saturday. I've never worked a day because I love so much what I do. I don't have this boundary that I create around it because it's the symbiotic relationship between the two that fuels me and gives me energy so I don't become resentful of the hours and the work because I just so genuinely love what I do. And the moment I don't love what I do anymore and it becomes tough to get out of bed and thinking, oh, geez, I don't want to go there, I stop going there.
I really commend you and thank you for sharing your strategy in how you found the balance, because I think that might be the issue with a lot of women is that we take on so many roles, but we don't give up
Yep.
any of the tasks.
Yep.
And to set yourself up for success, you've clearly delineated, what you're up for, what you're willing to outsource in
Yep.
whatever way that is, whether it's to husband, to house cleaner, to however that has to happen.
Yeah, there's a lean manufacturing of your life that goes along with it. There's this Amanda Lang, who's a CBC correspondent. I mean, Shawna, you'll appreciate that because it's a Canadian person. She wrote this book called The Power of Why, WHY, and she talks about lean manufacturing her life, and she uses this example, and it's perfect. And she says, she makes pizzas at home, and her family appreciates the making the pizzas, and she would get really resentful because her kids would never volunteer to grate the cheese. And she'd make all these big pizzas for this pizza party, and she'd be hours grating the cheese for the pizzas. And then as part of lean manufacturing, it's like you take out all of those steps that your consumer doesn't care about. Her consumer, which is the kids, the family who are eating the pizzas, don't care that you grated the cheese. Buy the freaking cheese that's already grated, right? And save yourself the time. So when I think about what are the things that my family really need from me and what are the things that really matter, is it me that's having to pack their lunches or that they're really going to care about, or they just need food? Is it fancy family vacations, or is it just time in? Like, what is it that I can lean manufacture in my personal life and my professional life that's going to give whoever the consumer is, whether it's my staff, if I'm leading my team, my kids, my husband, what they truly value, and all of the extra stuff I'm going to cut out because they don't value it and it just takes time away from the things that are truly important.
Yeah, and an easy way to build resentment.
Exactly. That's right.
Grating all the cheese. You don't need to grate your own cheese.
You don't need to write the thank you note that's like 3 pages long, because people maybe don't appreciate that as much. I don't know, whatever it is, that's those extra things that you're pouring into that you think people appreciate, and they may not. And just even having those conversations with people to understand what is it they need from you and what does that look like, and don't make assumptions about it.
My guess is that some women, one of the reasons that we may hesitate to take on leadership roles is we just don't feel like there's room. If we're already doing all these things,
Yep.
it can just seem like, well, how can I do that? And
Yep.
so sometimes, I mean, I hear women that feel like, even later on in life, like I've kind of put my dreams aside and I've never done all the things. I could have done this and I could have done that, but I didn't because I was doing this. I was doing the family thing, or I was doing the whatever
Yeah.
it is. And that's got to be, one of the things we have to change in our mindset if we want to be leadership roles.
Well, and I think too, like what a difficult position to put your kids in to for them to think that you put your aspirations aside
Mhm.
for them. And what a burden for them to have to wear is that you were this martyr who lived for them and their dreams. I mean, of course, every mom has mom guilt, particularly the ones who spend a lot of time away from their children, traveling or in work positions. But when you talk to my children, they are so stinking proud that I'm the president of Wesleyan. We live on campus. They're at every sports event wearing their Wesleyan t-shirts, which is hilarious. It's a women's college. I've got two boys. And they are like my walking billboards because they're so proud of this, and that I travel internationally and do these things. Um, and they know I love them, and they know that I'm there for them and all those pieces. But I'm a better mother because I'm fulfilled, and I'm lit up inside, with the passion of what I'm doing and what I'm contributing, versus being resentful because I feel as though I had to water down certain parts of myself to for whatever their needs are. Their needs are being met, but they're being met by both parents, not just me, which is the key part.
And I love how you keep referring to being lit up inside. And so, what about that listener that's out there that maybe is thinking, like, you know what, maybe I could, maybe I'm not traditional college age, maybe I'm older, but
Yep.
maybe just maybe I want to do this or I want to do that. Like, how would someone get started if they haven't been chasing that dream
Yeah.
later in life, maybe that as a non-traditional student or leader?
Yeah, and figuring out what it is that gives you energy, I think, is the first step. For me, being around people gives me energy. I'm a crazy extrovert. I go into rooms of people and I feel energized afterwards. So I knew that leading teams, fundraising, recruiting, sales, those types of things were what energizes me. So figuring out jobs and talking to people that you might know who do those types of things. So understanding where your energy comes from and then seeing what jobs align with that. As far as pursuing educational opportunities for women who are older in life, I mean, women's colleges have a particular responsibility to do that, I believe. And so for non-traditional learners. So for us, we have a scholarship called the Working Warriors Program, which is for working women that gives full rides to women in our area for their master's programs. And so a lot of women's colleges are really focused on non-traditional learners, particularly women, of course, with children, and making sure that there's a lot of flexibility in the programs to get them through. And that's the other thing, not just women's colleges, but just small schools. When you're thinking about going back to school, think about these smaller institutions that create this holistic wraparound care of a community where you're going to know people who, when you can say, I've got to work late or I have childcare issues. I'm having trouble financing my degree. Can you point me in all of your financial aid or scholarship opportunities? So just thinking about what's your best fit, what fires you up, where do you get energy from? Talking to people where that might align, who can give you some advice on different career options that might align with that, and then thinking about what's going to be the best fit for you from a community perspective if you're investing in going back to school, because it is. And I did my master's degree really late in life. I just finished it just before this job. I didn't go right after my undergrad. I was traveling. I had two kids, and it seemed really overwhelming to do that. And it wasn't until COVID that was grounded as far as travel was concerned, that I could make that investment in my time. And gosh, it was a slog. So you really want to make sure that you are set up for success with whatever institution and community that you have. So consider women's colleges, consider small schools is my advice.
You've been at this college for almost two years now.
Yep. Yep.
What do you foresee in the future for yourself?
Well, I'm at Wesleyan.
How do you want to continue to grow the program, and then will that contribute to your own personal growth? Do you see yourself moving on in any way to something bigger, better? Maybe that opportunity is just going to arise organically over time, like
Well,
this.
Shawna, there's no bigger and better than the oldest women's college in the world, right? So, I mean, this is the best place to possibly be. So, um, what I see is, yes, we're going to grow Wesleyan for sure. We expect to increase our enrollment by 30, 40%. We will be internationalizing. We will be building more interdisciplinary programs. We just opened up a downtown space, which does entrepreneurial and entrepreneurial innovation design thinking program. We just programming for our students, but also for community. We have a CEO Institute, CEO standing for Creating Equal Opportunities. And this is for young women who come into our program who it's a personal board of directors. Each student gets a peer mentor, an academic mentor, an industry mentor, and an alum mentor. So there's this wraparound care to make sure that you've got these mentors and sponsors who say your names in rooms that matter throughout your 4 years. And that's augmented with programming and experiential learning. So, of course, renovating buildings, fundraising for all sorts of initiatives, and new programming both inside and outside the classroom. So we've got big plans. We just launched our 5-year strategic plan that aligns all of this with our response to workforce needs in the community and beyond, and our overall vision, which is educating leaders who are going to accelerate equality. And to do that, we need more women in leadership and on corporate boards across industries. And so for us, I think about the responsibility to educate women and prepare women so that they are comfortable at every single table, boardroom table, fancy dinner table, and everywhere in between. And so I think about, for instance, we do Robert's Rules of Order, which are boardroom rules, right? We do it at the undergraduate level. And that came to me because I'd messed that up like 25 times when I first graduated. I was sitting on boards and I'd be like, I'll make that motion. They're like, it's not time to do that. I'm like, no, because I didn't know. And so let's do that in undergrad. And the same thing, I grew up really poor. I was not, didn't have access to these, fancy dinners. And so it was my grandmother who sat me down on a rainy afternoon and set this beautiful table with all the forks and all the knives and all the spoons and said to me, Meaghan, it's not if, but when you find yourself in these important tables, I always want you to come with confidence and know what you're doing. And so we're doing that type of work here to make sure that we level the playing field, no matter your socioeconomic background, but you're going to have a great degree, of course, that's table stakes at that college, but all of these other things that's going to build this confidence and experience in a safe space for 4 years. So when you graduate out, you're graduating into whether it's middle management or beyond because of all these things we've done to augment your degree. And those are the things we're doing here at Wesleyan.
Do you have any remote programs, or is it all on campus?
Yeah, all of our master's programs are online, and they're for men and women, our graduate programs, because they are remote. They don't come to campus. And we do have an online remote program at the undergraduate level as well. And that is for women only. So yes, you can access this remotely. We have many non-traditional, different types of learners from all over who are taking these programs.
I mean, wow, you're just getting me excited. It's like, is it ever too late to,
Never. Oh gosh, never, ever, ever, ever too late. I mean, an investment in education you have with is your best investment. I mean, I still think, even though that higher education has been under fire, particularly in the U.S. for several years now, particularly in private institutions, and this assumption that people are graduating out from like fine arts degrees with $150,000 of debt. And although there are cases like that, I'm sure and those might be some bad actors, but most institutions, private institutions, and I'll speak particularly to Georgia, the Georgia Independent Colleges, that's not the case. We work with you and to make sure that you have a degree that you're going to be able to work no matter what age and stage you're at, that is going to translate into dollars and experience. And because it's small schools, you're getting paid internships and mentorship and all these other things that whatever your career path is going to be at whatever age, you're going to be set up for success. So I still believe to this day that social mobility, your surest bet for social mobility comes through education. And I'm a big believer in that and a product of that. And I see that every day at Wesleyan.
And Meaghan, I want to just backtrack a little bit. You talked a little bit about growing up, excuse me, and with your grandmother and that experience. But I want to know a little bit more about, you said you like fundraising. Like, who likes fundraising? First of all, but like, how did you get to the place where you enjoy fundraising and
Yeah.
marketing and this leadership? Tell us about Megan and how she became the Megan that we are talking with today.
Yeah, listen, I love fundraising. I'll get into that, but I graduated out of McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, and I thought I was going to be a lawyer. And my thesis advisor at the time said, "You're no lawyer. Like, are you kidding?" I said, "What do you like to do?" And at that point, I had been volunteering at the Humane Society. I loved animals, and doing some fundraising. Like, you do volunteer work and you do events. And somebody said to me, "That's a real job. You can go be an actual fundraiser." And so I just went online to Charity Village, which is a nonprofit, site for all sorts of activities. And I found this job for a fund development assistant with no experience needed, 0 years of experience, because I was coming straight out of undergrad in Calgary, Alberta, which is where Shawna is sitting right now. And I was in Ontario, which is several provinces over, for at the Alberta Adolescent Recovery Center, which was treating youth 12 to 21 who are chemically addicted to drugs. And so I applied, and they said, "Have you ever been to Calgary?" I said, "No." They said, "Do you have family here?" I said, "No." They said, "So what are you going to do?" I said, "Just give me the job. I'll figure it out." And so I got the job. I told my boyfriend at the time, I'm leaving. I'm moving to Calgary. He said, "I heard they've got a lot of good stuff going on in the trades. Can I come with you?" We sold everything we owned. We had 3 suitcases. We moved to Calgary. This boyfriend is now my husband. And he proposed immediately. We'd only been dating for 8 months. And I thought, well, that's a nice ring. I'm going to take that and we'll live together. We'll see how it works out. Turns out we've been married 15 years in August. Um, and I was at the rehab center for 6 or 7 months, and then Leukemia Lymphoma Society, and then Affordable Housing, Horizon Housing Society, and realized that, like, sort of honing my skills and learning things from other people, but realizing that if you wanted to really be in a professionalized environment around fundraising, hospitals and universities, colleges and universities is where you wanted to be. And so I'm a big believer in experience in nonprofit because they don't have a ton of money. So you get to be everything. And I always say, like, don't, when you're young or you're just starting out, don't worry about the money or the title, just the experience. So I got to do volunteer management and event planning and administration and fundraising and all of these different things. And then I worked at the University of Calgary for several years as a major gift fundraiser, $1 million plus in that range. And that's where I really saw the magic. And this was under Elizabeth Cannon, who was the president there, who's still one of the most brilliant women I've ever met in my entire life. And the best fundraiser I've ever seen. And the magic of philanthropy. When you find a donor and a project that they get excited about and they fund, and what happens after that to an institution or an initiative, that became like a bug to me. Like I caught that bug and was like, my gosh, if I can figure out how to inspire people to invest in things that really matter, there's greater good and societal good that comes from that. So I worked in the Faculty of Social Work. I worked in the Faculty of Nursing. I worked in veterinary medicine at the University of Calgary, doing that fundraising work. And it was soon after my first son was born that we decided we wanted to move back to Ontario to be closer to the grandparents. And I started as an executive director at Huron University College in London, Ontario, Canada. And I had this unbelievable president who came about a year after I was there, who saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself, and promoted me to vice president and gave me, I don't know, 7 or 8 departments, and just said, "Go, I'll give you all the resources you need to build these portfolios and build these teams and support you." And that's what we did. And we had this wonderful opportunity to build this institution together. And from there is when I moved to Wesleyan after 8 years at Huron, which is a wonderful experience, and built up this incredible team of predominantly women, and had this worked myself out of the job, which I always think is when you're ready to leave, is that I wasn't needed anymore. I had these wonderful associate vice presidents who all their departments were singing. The institution was in great financial shape. Just it was time for me to go, and to I think you know when it's time for you to vacate a seat and give somebody else a chance. And as a leader, that's incumbent upon us, is that we know when it's time to stand up and for somebody else to sit down and add their unique gifts to the portfolio or to the institution. And then it was time for a new challenge here. So that's kind of my background and how I fell in love with fundraising. And honestly, if you can figure out revenue generation as an individual, I mean, you have a skill set that I think a lot of organizations and industries want. So that's something I realized early on. If I can figure out how to generate revenue for organizations, I'll probably always be employed. And within a world of chat GPT and AI, I'm banking on that.
You know what I really love is that at the beginning of the journey, you just had no idea and you just trusted yourself
Yep.
to just go where your passion was, and each step led to the next step. And I think it's a strong message that we need to really listen to our gut and be confident with, the steps that we take, because we don't need to see the whole ladder. We just need to know what's the next rung. And
Yeah,
when
that's right.
we follow our gut and our passion and with good intentions, it's going to take us somewhere wonderful.
That, it's I'm always the most nervous when I meet students who come here and they already have their entire life mapped out.
Mhm.
That's the worst one for me. They'll come and they're like, I'm gonna come and I'm gonna do business, and then I'm gonna get into a great MBA program. And then I'm going to intern at this consultancy. Then I'm gonna do this, 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 and this, and this, and this is how it's all gonna work out. And I'm like, that person, when it doesn't work out that way, because life is not linear, is usually devastated. What I
Mhm.
love is when I've got a student who's looking at Wesleyan, and I said, "What do you want to study?" I don't know. I'm like, awesome. Take
Yeah.
everything, figure out what lights you up. Figure out what you're, because if you study what you love, money will follow.
Yeah.
Success will follow. If you, because you're studying something that ignites in you, makes you happy, makes you energized, and you'll find all those other paths because you're not resentful of it. So, to your point, my career, I think maybe title wise, it's been linear in the way of that progression to president. So if you looked at my LinkedIn or my resume, you'd say, well, that was very linear. But when you look at the industries and the geographical moves, it's been saying yes to opportunities and trusting my gut and my instinct to do that, but also having a partner at home that said, "Go chase your dreams. I've got you."
Yeah. I think it's a strong message to our listeners that, may be ready for a next step, that it's not too late. And just like you said, start, exploring what you're passionate about, and take a step from there. You don't need to know the whole plan.
Nope, that's right.
I was going to just before we get to the wish for our listeners, if people are listening, because I know I'm inspired hearing just the story of Wesleyan, and of course knowing President Blight personally, and and also hearing more about your journey. There may be people that are inspired that want to contribute to Wesleyan in some way, because this is the school that has been around and has been, granting degrees to women longer than any other school in the world. So if people do, and I can also put a link in the show notes, is there some way that if people just hear this podcast and they want to make a contribution to what you guys gals are doing over at Wesleyan, what would be the best route for that?
Yeah, you can go on our website, of course, wesleyancollege.edu. And Alli, that'd be great if you put it in. And there's a donate now, and you can select anything that you might be interested in to support. So, of course, we would love any contribution. A lot of Wesleyan is run through the generosity of our alums and people who are just really supportive of the work that we're doing for young women in this area. We are majority minority. 56% of our population is women of color, and we're a Title III school. So we do a lot of work. Most of our students are Pell eligible. And so we do a lot of work with underserved, marginalized populations to ensure that they're workforce ready and set up for success, and also breaking a lot of generational poverty and barriers. So we see this as also a responsibility of women's colleges. So if that interests you and excites you or motivates you, thank you for saying that, Alli. We, of course, would love your support.
Now we'll
And
also post, hey, if you're interested in going back to school or getting into leadership, we'll have all that information if
Absolutely.
Wesleyan is, you know, something that you want to consider or another school. So yeah, we'll put all that in the show notes. So
Well, and here, listen, I'll do one better for anybody who comes through this podcast. We'll give you a 10% discount on a master's degree. And so if you are listening to this podcast and you want to do an MBA, we'll give you a 10% if you come to us and say, I heard this podcast and I'm watching Shawna and Alli. Then I will create that partnership and we'll call it the, remind me of the whole name
girls,
of the
girls talk healthy aging.
Girls Talk Healthy Aging Scholarship.
Amazing. Thank you for your generosity.
Of course. And you can do
Wow.
it online, of course. You can do it from Calgary, Alberta, and do an MBA.
Wow. If you had a wish for our listeners, what would it be?
We need you. We need more women to step up in leadership positions. And we need you now. We need you more than ever, particularly in the US, where there is an erosion that's happening of rights and human rights against women. And so I think because there is a lot of boundaries that are being put up and roadblocks that are being put up to certain groups who are leading, I think we need you and your courageous thoughts and action and voices more so now than ever. So if you're willing, there's room. And I think, you know, there's a huge community of women who want to make room for you to be here with us and to reach down and pull you up, and a community here for you when you're ready.
Well, my wish is that people that are listening to this podcast will take you up on your scholarship offer. I am going to be pumping that up. Thank you again for your
Yeah,
generosity.
absolutely. Happy to.
And my wish is that women will hear this and be inspired to just take it to the next level, whatever that is
Right.
for you out there. Just take it up a notch, do something different, step out of your comfort zone, just go for it.
Yep. That's exactly it.
Thanks for listening. You'll find me, Alli, on Instagram at Alli Kerr Fitness.
And you'll find me, Shawna, on Instagram at Shawna Kaminski. Feel free to pop us a DM with questions and or feedback. If you're enjoying the Girls Talk Healthy Aging podcast, please subscribe and share it with other health-minded women. Ratings and reviews are also much appreciated and help us get our message out to a larger audience.
Until next time, be healthy and be happy.